There we are. All right. So thank you for joining us for this afternoon session at Math Institute. This is exploring a rigorous and versatile routine. And I'm so glad to welcome Meagan and Katy to present this session. Let me know if you have any tech trouble. I'll be here behind the scenes. Go ahead, Meagan and Katy.
Well, good afternoon. I hope everybody had a delicious lunch or a nice little break or maybe a walk if it stopped raining near you. I'm Meagan, and if you meant to come to exploring and rigorous versatile routines, then you're in the right place. And if you didn't, stay anyways, because it's going to be fun. So, um, and yeah, so with that said, so I'm Meagan Hymes. I am the program supervisor for Metro North, Blaine. I'm at the Blaine site, part of the Metro North Consortium. I've been a teacher for over 20 years, but I've been an ABE for 12. And I've mostly taught in one-room schoolhouse environments. So if that applies to any of you, that's the context I come from. So I've always covered a full range from beginning ELL all the way up through GED and college prep. So that's sort of my background. And I am co-presenting with Katy.
Hi, everybody. I am with Minneapolis Adult Education. This is my 10th year teaching. I have been in adult education longer than that. I've even lost track. I am currently teaching math, and that actually is where my teaching license is as well. I've been working in HSE classes within our program for probably close to 7 years now. And I'm excited to do this presentation today.
And those of you here, if you don't mind, we are a small group. If you wouldn't mind putting your context into the chat right now, it might help us with when we're going through the slides, addressing maybe what we know or could be helpful in your context for what we're about to do. So whether it's like online, in person, asynchronous, all of the different, awesome. So thanks, John, DOC in person. Yes. So that could be helpful. Great. So some online and some synchronous. So this will be helpful for us. So thank you for that. All right, Katy, I'll let you go ahead.
No problem. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So welcome. We are very excited to continue the work that we started this morning with Heather. Our objectives for this workshop are that we want to explain how both slow reveal graphs meet both math and reading standards. We want you to be able to experience a slow reveal graph as a participant, but then also to be able to experience it as, and think about teacher moves that you would do to make this work in your classroom. We'd also like to talk about how to make this task rigorous and how you use like evidence-based ideas with this task. And then finally, we know that everybody comes from different backgrounds, and so we wanted to explore and help you identify ways that you can differentiate this based on your classroom and or if you are using tech or non-tech.
So the college and career readiness standards provide a nice like guidance and benchmarks. And while ELA and math skills are different, they also overlap. And especially if you look at the practices and shifts between ELA and math, they overlap quite well. So the biggest goal, right, and what we're trying to get at here today is that regardless of the context you're in and whether or not you have a multi-level classroom, although most of us always have a multi-level classroom, the goal is to facilitate the growth in student thinking and hearkening back to this morning, right? Some of those three hallmark things that we're trying to get at. And so regardless of your background or what you're comfortable with or what you're teaching, ELA and math do overlap and can combine even if your target at the time is a math standard.
So I wanted to show you guys this because this we want to ground us in the math practices. There are 8 of them, but I found this really cool graphic in one of the Facebook groups that I'm in that was talking about how one of the original writers of the practices started clumping these practices together to make them seem more manageable and obtainable for teachers to be able to implement them in their classroom. And so we have 4 different quadrants here. We have the math sense making, which covers math sense and use appropriate precision. So that's math practice 1 and 6. And then math drawing, so being able to model and use tools. Those are math practices 4 and 5. Math structure, which is being able to see structure and generalize. And that's math practices 7 and 8. And being able to explain math, we have your students do that. So being able to reason and explain and question things, and that's math practice 2 and 3. And so like our goal is basically to ensure that our students can have opportunities to practice these skills in the classroom. And so we're wanting to then ground what we're doing today in these practices as well.
And then taking that same idea, so the top sort of bluish color there is carried forward from the chart that Katy just talked about. And then the purple is how that overlaps. So those are the ELA shifts and how those connect. So you think about sense making, and that connects to complexity, because as we want our students working with more and more increasing complex materials, right? They're working to make sense of things. The same with modeling, right? This is based on evidence. Like we're showing students are modeling things, and especially in math, if we're asking them to draw a graph, like we're going to talk about today, or this morning, they have to use evidence to, where did you get that data from? What does that mean? There's all sorts of ways to think about evidence and how that connects to modeling. The same with structure and generalizations in math. That applies to the knowledge that we're building with students through ELA standards and the practices and the shifts. So, and then my favorite is sort of this reasoning, explaining, questioning, that relates directly to ELA with, again, complexity, evidence, knowledge. They overlay nicely. So again, just be thinking about these things, keep them in your mind. We'll be asking you or giving you some time to reflect on it in a little bit. But that's where what our goal is for today, is to think about how all of these things overlap.
All right. So the next thing that we're going to shift into is doing our first activity. So we are going to ask you to be ready to notice things. Okay. Looking at that screen, be ready to notice things, be able to type your answers into the chat. Be prepared to explain your thinking. So as you're typing answers into the chat, we may do something very similar to Heather, which is calling you guys and explain or ask you to expand on your thinking. And for this activity, again, we ask that you put on your student hat, okay? So we want you to be a participant in this and very much just be thinking as a student might think. Are there any questions before we begin?
And you don't have to, but feel free to turn on your camera if you would like to. We're a small group, so.
All right. So for this first one, I'm wanting just to ask you kind of, what do you notice? And what do you wonder? What do you notice?
So Jean says the bars start high and get lower. Oh, they're going fast now. So we have uh the colors are in a gradient. Nice. Yes, I like that. Notice decreasing bars and wonder why. Why are they decreasing? Yep, the bars are decreasing in height. Gradient colors divided into 5 parts. The bars get smaller. Will the last one be at the bottom? I wonder what the axis labels will be. Justine, do you want to say more about that? Thank you for that. I wonder what the axis labels will be.
Well, I see that. Is it okay if I unmute and talk instead of type?
Please do, yes.
Okay, cool. I see one of the like axis like sides has popped up now, but like without that and it was just the bars, I was like, okay, what is this measuring and everything like that. So I was curious like what type of information will the graph show me?
Thank you. Kale, can you unmute and talk to me about your comment?
So
Kale?
Kale's comment is, I wonder why those are the only states graphed. Someone else mentioned, so Carolyn, you also said something about that. Can you share a little bit more about, Carolyn, you said, I wonder what we are tracking about the states?
Right. Just simply, I see 5 states listed. I know that there's something that's maybe somewhat the same about them based on the colors, but there's obviously something different about them based on the heights of the bars. And I have no idea what it is.
All right, so my next question then is, hold on, you guys. I'm not used to using Zoom, and so I am not able to see all my screen. Hold on. There we go. So we already answered this question because I accidentally was trying to move my chat bar and it clicked on the screen and showed the state name. So you guys all identified that in the chat. Sorry, guys. Want to know what do you think this graph might be about? Now knowing the state information here, what do you think this graph might be about?
So a couple of participants have noticed that the source at the bottom of the graph says that it is about refugees or that it's from Refugee Processing Center. So noticing that source is making them wonder, does this have something to do with population or population census? Justine says she thinks she's cheating by reading the source, but it's not cheating. You are using evidence and information on the page. That is not cheating. You're using your resources. Good. So is it about refugee processing? So now that that's been seen, oh, could it be about housing price? Chocolate bars produced in each state. Oh, okay. And Carolyn shared, I don't know a lot about people or refugees in these states, but I know we often track counts of people, funding. Oh yes, and Justine comes at yes. Oh, housing price. I like that. So lots of great ideas here about what this might be tracking
Yeah,
in
nice
these states. Yeah.
All right. What new information did we just learn about?
Yeah, so top states for resettlement. And yep, all about refugee resettlement. California is top in refugee resettlement. The information collected. Nice, you guys are already diving into what does this mean? Right? What is the measurement that's happening here? One of the comments is the info collected has been organized, and this is the top, meaning largest. So there aren't even any. So Carolyn, what would make you think, so we don't have any numbers on the screen. So what would make you think, what would make you say that it's the top or it's the largest?
Well, I actually put a question mark after that.
Oh, you did. Yes, you did.
Yeah, because I don't know. I just saw the word top, and that is like, to me, that's the highest. But that, I understand that that could mean something different too, which is why I questioned it.
No, nice. And you're pointing to a really great piece here too, because it's just the language, the vocabulary top. What does that mean, right? The top 5 states for refugee resettlement. What does top mean? Does it mean the highest? Or does it mean the largest? Nice connection there. And well, and a question about that.
Danielle pointed out the like top how.
Right. Yes. Yes. And thank you, Danielle. Yeah, there are still many questions to answer. Yep. Oh, Carol, good question. What does the resettlement actually mean, right? Where did they come from elsewhere in the US first, or is this resettlement? Oh, yes, thank you. And Martha is also like, yeah, I wondered that too. Resettlement from where? That's a great question. I don't know if we'll find the answer for that or not today, but that's a good question.
I agree. All right, so if you look, there's some more information that's now been revealed. What is that new information? Some of you guys were asking originally, I wonder what those bars meant and how those relate.
Yes, 9 months of data. Susan, yes, dates. Now we have the y-axis. Yes, thank you for this. So now we have the y-axis and the amount of time. The dates, 2020 and 2021.
Yep, counting numbers of people over a certain set of dates. I hadn't even noticed that, Tristan. You're right. Those dates
During
were
COVID.
that time.
Yes.
What a time to.
It all links back. Yeah. Yes, that was a very good observation.
So now, since you guys have talked about the axis and stuff, I want to know what scale do you think this graph might use along the vertical and along the vertical or y-axis?
Thousands of people. Based on COVID, maybe not much. Probably not a single count, but something like tens, hundreds, thousands. By 10,000s. Again, thinking thousands, tens of thousands.
I'm going to invite Carolyn to unmute and talk to me about what she means by probably not a single count.
Just that, I see first rung, second rung, third rung, fourth rung, fifth rung, or what would we call those, rows. Just that I am pretty sure that's not one person, two people, three people, that's all. But in another chart or graph, I know it could be, counting something else.
Thank you. All right. So now I've just revealed a little bit more information about this graph. And good, Justine. We just learned a new piece of information. What did we just learn? What has changed? What's new?
Yep. So Jean, so the y-axis goes up by 100.
Jean, could you want to unmute and tell me how you were able to figure that out? I don't see any labels on that axis. How were you able to figure that out?
The 320 on New York means that that's where the bar is. So then each line must represent 100, so that would represent 320.
Oh, that's pretty clever.
All of the students are very curious about what comes next, Katy.
Yes, and I'm wondering.
Oh, Justine is saying that this feels like a small number. 320 feels like not very many.
It kind of gets us to think, because like a lot of us guessed like into the hundreds or 10,000s or 100,000s. What do these lines mean? We knew they didn't mean like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 like refugees. And somebody I think said, I think the numbers might be smaller than the 10,000s or the thousands that we might be used to because it was during COVID. So did that number of 320 surprise you at all?
Well, Susan is really surprised that Kentucky is in 5th.
I was too. Justine.
Since we don't see the scale, so maybe it's really like 320,000, says Carolyn.
Ah, that's a good point.
Rachel agrees. But Justine, yes, we don't know what the scale is.
Well, and this was one of my questions, and you guys already had figured it out. How can we use this information to estimate other bars along the scale and the vertical lines? So let's go to the next one. Now, what new information did we just learn?
Carolyn says, whoa. Why do you say whoa, Carolyn? Oh yeah, Carol says super low.
Same idea, yes.
Yes.
So that surprised a lot of you guys. Why is that surprising?
And these are the top states. And Martha's like by the hundreds, but still wondering if it makes sense because it is during COVID. Yes, Jean. Jean says the COVID observation was so important.
Yeah.
And Tristan, yeah, I thought it would be higher for sure. Rachel is still wondering how Kentucky is in there. Oh, yes, Danielle says, because we constantly hear on the news about immigration.
We already answered that. So now that we know that middle value of New York, what do you guys think California is, or Texas, Washington, Kentucky? What do you think those values might be?
Yeah, and Susan makes a good point too, that not all immigrants are refugees.
Yeah. Laura.
Yeah, and so also thinking about where these states are located. So Carol offers like the border states like California and Texas would be higher, with people who are traveling by, ways other than airplane. So Justine's guesses are 500, 360, the 320 we know, and then 280 and 250.
What do you guys think about Justine's estimates? Would you guys agree with those? Do you disagree? And now she's doubting herself. She says, oh, the 361 could be higher though.
Danielle agrees. Susan offers in 2022, the US took in 25,465 refugees total, and that was a 123% increase. And there are 50 states, so she thinks this doesn't make any sense.
No, she says this makes sense.
Oh, so this makes sense. Sorry, I misread that. I was going to ask why. Jean says yes. Justine is rethinking. Luella says looks good. Laura thinks Texas could be closer to 375.
Okay. Right. How did you guys do?
Luella says, I like that we are just estimating. No pressure to get the exact answer. Yes, good estimates.
Yeah, you guys are pretty darn close. So I'd love to hear more. Some of you guys were really surprised by Kentucky, as was I. Why does Kentucky as a state surprise you as a place for refugee resettlement? And what do you guys think about Minnesota not being on this list? Laura says the politics of the state, not a border state. It's inland and the rest of the edges or the rest of the states are like border or edge states. Carol says it's a red state that is smaller population with fewer social supports. Oh,
yeah.
You want to unmute and talk about that? I didn't know that.
So one of my friend's husband, so she was a teacher in the St. Paul Public Schools. Her husband worked for the Ford plant, and many years ago they relocated it to Kentucky. And so a lot of the jobs moved with it.
Did your friend move with it too as well?
Yep.
Thank you for sharing that bit of information. I did not know that.
Yeah, that is very helpful.
Yeah, Martha
that
says
puts a different perspective. So Laura is asking, do we know whether or not this refugee resettlement is for one specific refugee group, or is this representing all refugee groups? And then Danielle also points out that students would need lots of background knowledge for some of these comments. So like location of states, size, politics, etc. So there'd be lots of room for discussion. Oh yes, and Patsy offers Nebraska is super high if we're looking per capita.
I didn't know Patsy came from Nebraska. All right, so the next question is that these numbers are in total number of refugees, not number of refugees in thousands or any larger scale, as you guys have already noticed. So how many people do you think apply for resettlement in the US? Carol says she thinks 2 million. $500,000. No idea.
$5 million. Ha 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 ha.
Well, are you laughing because you're like,
Yeah.
I got no idea, this is just a random guess, or?
I think it's good to encourage students, like, even if it sounds crazy, just share it, kind of laugh it off.
Martha says asylum seekers were actively shut out at the time during per Trump policy. That's a really good point, Carolyn. No idea, because there must be a big difference between the numbers that actually apply and those that actually achieve success in obtaining refugee resettlement.
Right. So you could even start to think of questions that would further drive, right, this graphing, like what percent were accepted or rejected.
Mm-hmm. You could talk about ratios and proportions here and different groups. Patsy put a link in there, but I'm afraid to open it because I'm sharing my slides.
It is refugee resettlement per capita. Which states do the most? It's from the Immigration Research Initiative.
It's totally legit.
Thank you, Patsy.
And actually Kentucky's on there too, but don't let me derail you.
No, but that would be a great resource, even if you wanted to do something like this or build off of what is already here with your students or in your classroom. That'd be a great resource for getting information.
Go Big Red.
And Susan brought up a really good point that it's important then to potentially talk about what is the difference between refugees and documented and undocumented, refugee versus immigration. Like how are all those things, like what do those terms mean? And so there was a video that was part of this slideshow that we decided not to show because we made the assumption based on the fact that we work in adult education that we are familiar with what a refugee is. And so that is something that you could potentially use with students if you choose to use this graph and this activity. All right, are there any last ideas about this? Okay. Time-wise, how are we doing?
Yeah, we're right on time. We're such a small group though. I don't know. I think maybe we just stay here. Yes, no.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I was looking at Danielle's comments. Students could discuss the stuff in breakouts, and you're right.
Oh yeah. Well, then you know what? Then
yeah, 19 people. So
then let's do it.
Okay, let me put you in some breakouts.
So here's what we're gonna do. Yep. So Patsy's gonna put you in some breakout rooms. We'll start. Let's do 5 minutes.
Patsy, just make sure this slide will go with them, right?
No, but we can put those questions in the chat. Actually, let me do that. So yeah, tell them what you'd like to do.
Yep. So in the breakout rooms, these are the two questions we'd like you to think about. So one, how was this experience for you, seeing information revealed slowly about the graph? And how do you think that impacted your thinking and interpretation of the graph? We were talking about that a little bit as we were going, but just think a little more on that. And then also, how could you use this with students, or what might this look like in your context? And we come from varying contexts in here: in person, online, DOC in person, one room schoolhouse situations. So think about how might you use this in your context, and how might that, relate back to your students. So a little bit of reflection time, and then we'll come back and ask a few people to share out. And then we'll keep going. So we'll see you back here in about 5 minutes.
All right, I'll give you 4 minutes and then you'll have a minute to wrap up your conversation. And if you get lost on your way to your breakout, let me know. It's just us.
I'll be totally like honest, my anxiety with like I kept hitting the thing incorrectly when I was trying to click on moving the
it was just
totally fine. No.
Meagan kind of like took over. I think she just like could read my mind that I was like, yeah.
You guys want to pop into groups?
So yeah, let's give them a minute and then
yeah, there's someone, Kale and Martha are all over group 1. Looks like Luella is all over group 2 and Carol is talking. Oh yeah, there's a talker in each one, so we're good. That's one thing I like about there's some new Zoom features. You can actually see if people have their cameras on or not.
Correct. There's a couple people. Yes. There's some people talking.
Yeah, I didn't like make sure there was anyone we knew in each one, but it's kind
of so yeah, so when they come back, we'll check in really quick and then
all right, off you go.
All right, welcome back. I hope you had, it looked like there was some good conversation going on. So, so that's great. Teacher reflection time, yay. So we'll just take a few minutes right now. We're about to take a 5-minute break so you can walk away, refresh your drink or whatever it is, stretch. But before we do that, anybody willing to share anything that came out of discussion that they were having in the breakout rooms? Anybody want to just share their own reflection of how you feel seeing information revealed slowly, how that affects your thinking and how that might affect your students' thinking?
It was definitely a theme in our breakout room that people themselves noticed more and thought how valuable this would be for students, and as well as people who had done it with their students and found that students got more information from the graph than they would have had they seen it all to begin with.
Thank you, Martha.
Yeah, thank you.
Maybe it was brought up in our group. It made me think about my own self. And when sometimes questions are posed, I look to the internet, like I can quickly use resources to investigate answers and things, and that can be useful. And also there's validity in not doing that and letting students like share without Googling or looking up information. And also then another person brought up just then that there's a value in looking how to evaluate sources, and like maybe in looking at what's credible or how to decipher that or what evaluating sources. So
thank you, Rachel. And yeah, and Justine shared in the chat that it allows for more engagement, right? Like Justine says, we want to know what's next, and making inferences and wondering allows us to be curious. And yeah, thank you, Rachel. That was a really great point too. It's you know, some of you have already probably used, or maybe you've used slow reveal graphs, or maybe you haven't seen this before, or maybe you've seen it, but you haven't used it with your students, whatever category you might fall into. But in thinking about even this morning and the 3 hallmarks that Heather was talking about, and how this information, when it's being slowly revealed to our students and even to us, right? Even as experienced educators, we can still get so much out of it when the information is coming at you more slowly. It also allows, and we'll dive into this a little bit more after the break, but it also then allows for differentiation, because you can stop and start at any point depending on where your students are at, and you can go more deeply, or you can back off and stay very on the surface. So it provides that diversity as well for differentiation. So anybody else want to share something before we pop away for a few minutes? Yes, Danielle, please.
Yes. I've done a lot of visual literacy in the last couple of years. I was teaching like a high level ESL class with a lot of students. So it'd be cool if there's a way to do this and for students to be in breakout groups and do it. But I suppose, how do you do the slow reveal, right? Like, because then they could have more meaningful and rich conversations if they're just with 3 people or 4 people rather than 28 people. So if you have any insights.
And so just to clarify your question, Danielle, so you're thinking about in with students online in breakout rooms, how would you walk through the slow reveal with them?
How could they do it themselves in smaller groups?
Oh yeah. Okay, great question. So all right, I will take that question and think on it, and let me see what I can come up with. I have some ideas. I'm not sure if they would work. So let's do this right now. Anybody else before we let everybody take a stretch break? Okay. So yes, Patsy. That's actually a great suggestion.
It would work, but that's what came to mind.
No, that's a great suggestion. Google Slides with animation probably would be one way to do it. Well, if anybody else comes up with any other ideas, please feel free to come back and share, and I will think on this. So we're going to take a 5-minute break right now. Please feel free to turn off your camera, step away, stretch, and then come back and we'll go through the last bit of our session together. So we'll see you back in 5 minutes. So we're going to get started again. I better stop then.
Now you can say something profound. Okay.
Now the pressure is on. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yep, I don't have it. All right. So too much pressure. So it looks like a few people are coming back. So if you're back at your computers, I hope you had a nice stretch break. Maybe got some tea, warmed up your coffee, ice in your soda, whatever is your cup of tea. Oh, great. Hello, welcome back. Welcome back. I'm going to dive back in here, and we are going to walk through another slow reveal graph experience now, but we're going to take a different lens. So this time we want you to put your teacher hat on and be thinking about your context and your setting for your students. The blue text at the top of each slide would be what you would be asking your students. And then the pink text on the slide will be what you would be doing. So you'll see what we're going to ask you to do. So you'll see on this first slide that we come to. And what I want to say is basically just think about, because we're all in different contexts here and you have students of many different levels in your classrooms. So think about sort of questioning teacher talk moves. And also I had started to talk about this before we went to break, but something that we'll try to dive into a little bit more now is how do you level this when you're offering it to a multi-level classroom? And think about places where maybe you would stop. Maybe in a slow reveal graph in your classroom, you would only go through the first 2 slides at one time. And then maybe a few days later, you'd come back to it, remember the first 2 slides, and then go on to the next 2 slides. Like maybe you wouldn't do it all in one sitting, or maybe you would only focus on certain parts of it. So just just know that as we're walking through this, we'll talk a little bit, and feel free to put things into the chat about your context and, like, you know, asking myself and others, oh, how might you do this in this type of context? Because it doesn't have to mean that every time you sit down to do a syllable graph, you're going to walk through the whole thing and do every single question with all of your students, because I don't know of any of us in a classroom that makes sense in. So just be thinking about that. And, you know, and then again, like Heather said this morning, you know, let the math it doesn't have to be about the math. Let the math play a role on its own. I really like that she said that, and I've already stolen it. So, all right, on with the show. So this graph here. So this is what you would say to your students in the blue. What do you notice? What do you wonder? Just like we walked you through with the refugee bar graph. So what I want to know from you, though, is what might your students in your context say to those questions? What do you notice? What do you wonder? So in thinking about your students, what might they say about this visual?
Florida being Floridaing. Carolyn says, is this the US and many states have different colors?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, not is it? It is. Many states have dark colors. It is a map of the US. I see many colors. Why are there so few colors represented? Why is that one blue? Students might call out the color of a state they know. Maybe like Minnesota. Maybe notice there's very little yellow.
Yeah, yep, and those are all great. And again, with students, depending on who you're teaching or what class you're in, you know, this might be the only slide you do at first. And you talk about, this is a map, right? Maybe you're working on building some vocabulary before you move on. This is a map. These are the different colors, or these are the different shades. Being able to recognize what state it is. Oh, Florida being Florida. Right? But maybe students don't even know that that's Florida. So maybe that's what you would have to, oh, and I like that, starting to already get into what colors, what's a good thing, what's not a good thing. Oh, great. And so Susan, yes, exactly. So you might have to be intentional about, right, what they're noticing and wondering. Might just be the colors, and maybe even just noticing it's the map of the United States, but they might not know much more. And so you might have to build that in, depending on what your context is. Too many tan brown mocha cappuccino.
It looks very similar in color.
I know, I love this. Oh, great question. So would people with color blindness be able to access this graph? That is a great question. And I suppose depending on what their color blindness is, they might be affected by the greens and reds. So that is certainly something to take into consideration also, if you have any of that knowledge about your students.
Susan also says, the idea of generating curiosity, though, is great, because right now I have no idea what this is about.
Yes.
Yes. Curiosity has been piqued.
And that's the one thing before we move on here, the one thing about this particular one, why we chose it, is because I do think this is extremely, it lends itself to a very large audience. And in the layers that are offered here that we're going to get to, it can be extended from a very low level ELL group all the way up. We'll get to where you can push GED students and college students.
And this could be something that you can use in a math classroom, and a social studies classroom, and an ELL classroom, right? It's extremely versatile.
You got it. It's going across the board. Okay, so now what new information did we just learn? And what do you think this map might be representing? And so again, what might your students say? Okay, so pie. Oh, I missed some comments about scale. Okay, we'll come back to that. All right, well, we have Amber says pie might represent largest crops. Okay, flavors of what? So what makes you, oh, pumpkins or cherries? So Luella, what would make you think pumpkins or cherries like they're growing?
Well, I think they would just take it literally like, well, these ones says pumpkins and these say cherries.
So you think your students would think growing, right?
Right. Yeah.
Amber, it sounds like you think your students would know that it's pie.
Amber, I'm curious about your statement of it would make sense why Florida is green.
It's key lime pie. And then that means that does Arizona like lemon? Does Massachusetts like blueberry? What would pink be? And then what is that other color? Like I was trying to decide of other pie. Now I'm hungry.
You're welcome.
Could I just inject one thought?
Mm-hmm.
I've recently been looking at paint samples. And so when I first saw pumpkin and cherry and equated them to the colors, I was like, these were colors of paints. I get why people are saying pies right now.
Oh.
Having not been looking at paint samples, I think I would have gone back, to flavors. But so that was just an interesting observation on my part as far as my frame of reference at the moment.
No, Carolyn, I appreciate that because what you're pointing out, though, is that that's what can happen with students, right? Students can be coming from multiple different perspectives or whatever they were doing the day before or the last month or and so perspective is going to have a lot to do with what your students say about any particular, and so it is just, it's about that curiosity and leaving it open, right, for students to say, oh, this is what you're leaving it in, that there is no right or wrong at this point, right? It's what do you think and where are you coming from on this? So thank you very much for pointing that out and sharing that. I don't know, Katy, if you're keeping an eye on the chat, I'm missing some of what's flying by at this point, but
no, people are trying to address the different colors, that maybe dark brown is pecan, some kind of nut, maybe dark brown's chocolate.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I guess let's move forward and see what it brings us next. Oh, so Carol says, I think the least ordered kinds of pie. Yes, and it's very tempting to fill in. Yes, Martha, to just fill in the void. Oh, I like it. So Rachel, say more about that. What do you mean by, oh, so apple?
Okay. There seems to be a lot more options, and just to what people have said, my own experience, Minnesota, I don't know. Apple's familiar, so I don't know. What are the colors? Lots of colors now that are small, but it's different now that it's showing on the side as a list.
No, great. Thank you, Rachel. Yeah, so now that there aren't names next to them, right? But you seeing them and seeing all of the different colors in the map, maybe your students are going to say something like, oh, now it could be flavors because I could see where that flavor might fit in to one of those boxes of color, right? So let's see, Florida, oh, key lime. Oh, but the real key lime is actually more yellow. That is good to know. Amber still thinks it's flavors of something, but maybe pie is too easy. Maybe it's ice cream. All right. Well, let's see where we're going. So yes, what do we know now? And what might your students say? So I'll ask this. I don't think so. Does this surprise you? Do you think this would surprise your students? Oh, what can't it be? Oh, I love that question, Danielle. So Martha, it surprises you. Martha, do you want to say why it surprises you?
Yeah, it absolutely surprised me. Because it just seems so specific. I mean, pie, and mind you, I think pie is a treasure. But I just was like, pie? You people are talking pie, and you got it right.
That's so great though. But again, right? So it could be just about anything. And I love what I'm seeing in the chat now too. Thank you, Martha, because it's like, oh, wait, what? That is what it is. And yes, you guys are all brilliant in all of your brilliance. You're already knowing where we're going next with this, and looking at where the source of information is. So before we jump there, anybody, let's see, Laura, I don't think my students think it would be flavors because they aren't that keyed into general pie. They would do something more like crops or something else. Yeah. And so they might be more surprised than other students might be, right? So again, depending on your context, you might get varying different levels and different answers based on perspective of the student. So this is great. All right.
You ready for the next one?
So, yes. So in thinking about this, oh, and there's all the flavors.
Sorry, did I just ruin it?
No, it's okay. No, it's all good. It's all good. So those are all the flavors. Yes, the key lime was correct. Anybody surprised by those flavors? Oh, banana cream. Okay. Yeah, interesting. There isn't apple pie on here. So everybody's like, where's the apple pie? Apple, where are you? Yeah, funny enough. So it's interesting that you say that, right? Because that's where we're going next with this. So people are like, wait, oh, let's see. Danielle says, name as many states as you can per color. Oh, that would be yeah, that would be a nice task activity to go with this. Yeah, great. Where's the apple pie? Well, maybe that has something to do with where the information came from. I don't know. Let's see. Um, so, okay, so in thinking about, so we walked through this. I think these visuals lend themselves, like I said, very well to any number of leveled classrooms. But where we're going to talk about now is just we're going to take a few minutes here, make sure I'm on time. And so we're going to take a few minutes and talk about how could you push something like this to the next level. So the first slow reveal we walk through, and this portion of this slow reveal, again, I think is accessible to many. But if you want to push your students a little bit in their thinking, so maybe this would be like a day 4 or 5. If you're walking through something like this, it could be for higher level students to work through on their own, or any level student as long as they're supported with the right questions. But to think about interpretation and validity of sources. Right. And this is another place where the ELA and the math really overlap, is thinking about evidence and where does that evidence come from? How valid is the source that information is coming from? So as some of you already pointed out, right, it told you where this information was coming from. And so here's kind of the breakdown, right? So you could ask students, what were the, like, how do you think this data was collected? And what might your students say about that, right? if they hadn't noticed that source on the first page. So you could be asking them, how was this collected? Oh yeah, sweet potato. Um, and yeah, it's a way to just keep them pushing forward. Yeah, great question, Susan. Why is it on here but not on the key on the map? Go ahead, Katy.
Next slide, right?
Yeah.
Please work.
So this map was put together by Food and Cooking. It's a kitchen site. And it was based on geotagged Twitter data from January 2021. And it was just tracking specific mentions and hashtags. So one way, you can go ahead and put the other questions up too. So a couple of ways to think about that and how you might take something like this and push it further is thinking about what biases this data might have. And how do you think, was it actually representative of each state? Where was the apple? What happened to that? And what might be a better way to collect the data if you don't think this was a valid source or a valid way to collect information. So again, it's layering and it's pushing that thinking and furthering the conversation into a deeper place about where is this information, not even like, can I recognize data, but where is this data even coming from? Yes, people who don't eat much pie may not be included. That might be one bias. Exactly. And so this is, again, a way to continue to push the thinking. Go ahead, Katy. Trying to walk us through here so we don't run out of time.
So the collection that we're showing you guys is all one collection from Slow Reveal.
Oh,
But then
yes.
along with the big one that we did with you, they have these little ones that then go on and can extend the talking about like how to like explore like bias in where your data is coming from. And so that could be a deeper conversation that could lead into ELA standards or mathematical standards. And it can come like fruitfully from a conversation. Several of you guys already mentioned this. Where is this data coming from? I wonder what it represents. Oh, geotag to hashtag data. Like, oh, that's a conversation, right? You guys got all excited about it. So it kind of elicits different, like allows you to look at different sources and evaluate and compare them and have that conversation.
Well, and even like what some of you are bringing up, right? So Amber says like some pies aren't social media pretty, so maybe they don't get tagged as often, right? Or some of us don't even mention food when we're online. That's not something that we do. Susan talks about what a better source might be. These are all conversations that you can be having in the classroom or facilitating in the classroom between the students and really getting them, which Luella, I think goes back to what you were saying when you came back from the first time we went into the breakout room is, right, critical thinkers. Like, how do we get our students critically thinking about data that they see and is thrown at them all the time through ads and media? And this is one way to actually dive into that, is asking them, where did this data come from? The validity of the sources, what might be a problem with that? Yes, now Apple, yep, it's the Connecticut is the one state Apple is from, Susan. So, yeah, and Carol points out too, right? This can be another thing that students could be talking about is it's the time of year. So maybe depending on the time of year this was taken, these were the pies most people were talking about because, if the majority of people are on Instagram or Twitter or whatever talking about pumpkin pie because it's close to Thanksgiving time, that might be the pie that gets associated, even though that's really not the pie that really is eaten most in that state. So all of these excellent points. Thank you. And this is the whole point of what we would want to get students talking about. Yes, because it can be very Eurocentric. And you know, and then here, even asking them the question about, would this data be more or less accurate than Twitter data, right? So this is the Instagram data, and then you could compare it across social media sites. Like, oh, do you think one social media site would be more accurate than the other? My guess is some students probably do think that. Or apparently it's not Twitter anymore, but I'm old and don't know these things. So, and Justine, do people really tweet about pie? I mean, you know, I don't know. That's a great question. And it'd be great for students to also come up with those questions. Okay, moving along here. So again, this is like another shot of showing Google Trends. And how it's different. So you could be asking them, right? We didn't do a side-by-side for you, but you could do a side-by-side with students, having them look at the side-by-side between Instagram and Google and see, comparing those, right? Oh, yes. And Justine says that she has never been on Twitter. So yeah, so that would, again, it might be like, I didn't even know this was a thing, right? Or my data's not on Twitter, so how am I included in this? But you could even, again, do a side-by-side of data and some comparison. Then you're getting to compare and contrast all of the lovely ways that, again, you're bringing math and ELA. And then some of my favorite questions to ask would just be of students is, you know, how would they have collected the data? I think once students walk through something like this and have some understanding and some conversation, I think this is where their ideas and it builds that confidence in them, like, oh yeah, I might have done this, or I might have thought about it this way. Letting them have that ownership of what they would have done with the data, how they would have collected it, can be really powerful. And again, keeping that conversation going. And yes, absolutely, Justine, because their ideas are really great talking points. And you know, dialogue in the classroom is key in my book. So, and these slow reveal graphs just offer themselves, like I said, they're so accessible to so many and can stimulate so much conversation. Okay, so let's see, where are we at for time? Okay, yeah. Do you want to do
reflection?
Yeah. So let's go ahead and do, let's go ahead and do one more short breakout room and have some reflection time for you guys. And then when you come back, we're going to talk about, we're going to really quickly talk about differentiation and adaptability of these to low tech, high tech, online, you know, paper, person only. So we'll talk about that when we come back before we let you guys go. But how about for right now, 5 minutes? Patsy, thank you, has shared the questions into the chat. But just think one way you can use this with your learners. And then also, how do you see these activities connecting to the 3 hallmarks that Heather brought up today? Conversational, real world, and rigor.
All right, I'll open up those rooms.
Yeah.
There we go.
All right. Welcome back, everybody. Is there anything that you guys would like to share that either your group decided or that you didn't get a chance to share in your group? We'd love to hear some final thoughts.
I have an idea. One of the things I was sharing with my group in the very last minute is that I am working with Min State and ABE programs to help transition students out of high school or out of ABE and into college level classes. And one of the biggest needs our students have is in an area called quantitative reasoning, which is exactly what these slow reveal graphs get students to do, to think about math, to talk about math, to reason with math. And one of the things that I am finding is as I'm trying to create curriculum, we need to give our students so many more experiences in doing these kinds of activities. And these are some of the skills that our students who are not going to go into calculus in college really need to have. And this is super robust, but might not be something that you're thinking, oh, this is really preparing them for post-secondary, when this is the perfect kind of activity to prepare them for some of those post-secondary tasks.
Thank you, Amber. Carolyn also wrote in the chat that we didn't get to the second question, but without a doubt, this kind of activity lends itself to discussion and appropriate rigor for various groups, and it doesn't get more real world. Any other final ideas? Yeah, Rachel, it highlights the value of reasoning.
This is Carolyn. I just wanted to add one thing about my comment about it doesn't get more real world, because you're drawing in on students' own experiences and sharing. I mean, we really might not care about pies in our world, but then once you have those great extension conversations about, you know, finding yourself or questioning the data or why that data and what pies would be good for you, then it becomes your real world.
Thank you for that clarification. That's great.
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn. That's great. Very well put.
Yeah, sometimes I think we overcomplicate it to make math into just like these intense equations, and really it's just there's elements of justification and rational thinking and how you look at things that is whittling it down to what's really important versus like the exponential equation, which, like, I don't know, it just, yeah, seems like we set the bar at a level that isn't rational.
No, thank you, Rachel. Yeah. And like I said a few times, I think it's important that, especially when doing activities like this, when the goal is, yes, you're developing skill and, you know, some of these developing concepts, but it's important that it's accessible as well, so that, you know, you're not, as you said, overcomplicating the process.
All right. I think we're going to move into our next section. So part of this that we wanted to hit on to make sure that you guys can really think about like how you can take this and how it is applicable to various levels. And a lot of you guys have already hit on these points through our conversation. But this is great for ELLs because you're interpreting visual information. It naturally allows you to build vocabulary as students bring things up. It allows you to introduce math vocabulary as well. So if students are talking about, oh, those lines on the side, you know, teacher, you can then give them a name and call it an axis, right? A y-axis. So it allows you to do notice and wonder. So it gets students to kind of stop and really slow down on interpreting data. And you can introduce this information if you have students that are at lower levels that need, or even, I'm not gonna lie, even my ABE students need this sometimes, to use sentence stems to be able to start to build that academic vocabulary and academic sentence structures. So sentence stems can be also something that you could use as a way to differentiate and allow students, all students to have access to this activity. As well with ABE, you're interpreting visually, you're analyzing data. As we mentioned before, just with the ELL, you're introducing vocabulary when it's needed. And I'll let Meagan kind of talk a little bit more about like being able to extend this with like being able to form text-dependent questions. Do you want to link that to one of the resources we're going to talk about?
Yeah, so, well, actually they're already in. So all of those resources are in the participant agenda. So in the participant agenda are resources for using sentence stems in science, social studies, math, and ELA. And then there's also a resource for building text-dependent questions because, right, ELA, like I said from the beginning, ELA and math overlap. And so you can still build text-dependent questions, just like Heather got everybody writing. Your students can start writing and even develop their own text-dependent questions about slow reveal graphs. So yes, all of those resources are available for you in the participant folder.
Are there any questions you guys have about any of these ideas or comments? I'm finding it really funny because I feel like a lot of times we just repeated things because you guys have just like brought up things naturally, and it's just been such a beautiful thing. So we really appreciate you guys for doing that. And the final piece of this is the differentiation and adaptability. So specifically, we wanted to bring about some ideas. Well, first of all, we're actually going to wrap around first back to the question that Danielle posed about how would you do this with students led in breakout rooms. She was asking that for a digital classroom, how would you allow them to do that? And so we kind of crowdsourced with the people that we had in the room and thought of some ideas. Google Slides with animations was one of the ideas. Being able to use Pear Deck, if you're familiar with that, that's another platform that allows you to kind of pause videos or slides and be able to insert questions that the students have to answer before they can move on. Desmos, another great platform that's specifically math-based, but has been used for many other contents. And then Amber was talking about Zoom and how now it has lovely features that I'm not familiar with because I don't use Zoom, but she says that you can share your screen into all the breakout rooms. So you can control the slides and how fast they move. You can broadcast into each of the rooms questions, and or now you can speak your voice into the rooms and say, okay, I want you guys to move on to the next slide or consider this question. And so those are different ideas of how to allow this to be a student-led activity in breakout rooms rather than you having the control all in one room. Now, we also know that you guys come from various backgrounds. So some of you work in DOC where you have either no access or limited access to tech. Some of you guys work asynchronously and so might work with packets with students. Many of you guys are synchronous. Some of you are digital or high flex. And so we wanted to make sure you know that there are various ways that you can use this activity in those different modalities and situations. So for example, if you do have access to digital resources, there is a website about slow reveal graphs. They have great resources. Both of these activities came from that website, and it's listed in the participant folder, I believe. Desmos has already some slow reveal graphs embedded in some of their lessons. Some of them are teacher made, some of them are Desmos made. Graphing Stories was another great one where it allows you to use graphs and data to have conversations with students. And you can also make your own. If there is something that you really want to address a topic in your classroom, you can use either current events or historical data or whatever relevant topics your students may want to engage with, and you can create your own. All of these are just like boxes covering the information, and then the next slide just takes off a new box, a new white box from it. So it's pretty easy. It just takes a little time to build. Some other low-tech printed ideas are the fact that you can print these slides, and you could potentially then either hand them to students if you're doing hand-printed packets, and then you'd have a different graph on each of those pages. That can get spendy if you want color, but that is a way that you can make it happen. And you can then embed instructions within each of those. So with each of those pages, you would embed instructions and questions, and maybe you have them reflect on like writing on paper instead of speaking if it's only one person in your class or you're sending the packet home. What else am I missing, Meagan?
No, you're good. You're on track.
Right. I just lost my...
Oh, that's okay. So it's just to speak into that a little bit is because I've taught in corrections, and especially during the beginning of the pandemic, I was not in the building at all, and yet but still trying to teach through packets. And I did do, I created packets with some of this instruction. So there was like the first page and then a blank page after it, asking the student reflection questions. Some students who I knew would flip right through. The instructions were that they were only to get the next set when they turned the first set in. There are ways to do this in paper packet mode. And or if you're in a classroom and don't have access to technology, like Katy said, you can use it on a paper packet. And then as you're walking through class, you're just, flipping to the next page. Or having students use some sort of math notebook for their reflections. So, and then whether it's synchronous or asynchronous, it's just about clear written instructions, right? Because it could be a TVM lesson, and lend itself to TVM that way very well. You would just be putting time in on the front end. It does require quite a bit of time of writing out all the instructions, but once it's done, and can be used over and over. So, and then updated questions as you move on. Back to you, Katy.
All right. I think these are, like I said, some of the things that we've included in your packet. We found that the Slow Reveal a Graphs website, we've included that. Collect Ed New York also had some resources and some lessons that they had made using Slow Reveal resources. And then specifically, we included in the participant folder question stems to a variety of different content areas: science, social studies, math. Any of the tools that we had at our disposal, we wanted to share with you so that you could also use them and didn't have to recreate any, wheels. Text-dependent question stems. So I hope that you guys have found that this being a helpful workshop to be able to work through and connect with what Heather spoke about this morning, about connecting these ideas to rigor, to conversation and real world applications. And that we want to open the floor now to give you guys the option to ask us any questions and ask or make any comments that you guys have.
Thank you, Vicki. Vicki says this is very helpful and it was new for her. So good.
Thank you.
It's always good to have another tool in your toolbox.
Great. I just want to mention I did put the link to the participant folder for this session specifically in the chat box, as well as those two links. They are also in the slides, which is also in that participant folder. Now would be a great time to give a heart or applause in your reactions, or to come on camera and give a thumbs up or a hearty heart to Meagan and Katy in your camera for all of their hard work putting this session together. Thank you so much for spending your Friday afternoon with us. The sun came out just as y'all were talking, so I feel like, yes, you're getting a round of applause from Martha. Thank you.
Thank you.
So it's a good things happening here. Look at all the love. Oh,
love it. Love it.
We also want to say thank you for being such amazing participants as well.
Oh, yes. Thank you for sharing all of your brilliance with us. It makes it a lot more fun.
Is anyone else thinking about what pie they want to make later?
Right.
Gail has joined us, and if you have any recipe questions about pie, Gail is the answer to all of those.
Oh, that's good to know.
That is a hidden gem on our Atlas team, is Gail's baking abilities. So I will also put yeah, Gail has all the I have recommend the chocolate chip cookie dough pie that Gail has made for us on many occasions. So, and of course, once in a while we actually have a math webinar on Pi Day, March 14th, which is always a good thing.
Rappleberry? Wow, Justine. Justine makes a rappleberry pie. It's rhubarb, apple, raspberry, blueberry, and strawberry all in one.
I
That sounds
stole that from
amazing.
an orchard I worked at as a baker, and it is seriously my favorite pie to this day.
Word.
Yes, you're gonna have to share that recipe. That sounds delicious.
Yeah.
When do
I
we have our next in-person session?
Yeah, I could. Golly, I love bacon pie.
That sounds amazing. I am going, you have this
Yes.
in your flyer, and you will also be getting a follow-up email from our office, but just so you have it handy, the Math Institute evaluation is here. That is also your pathway to CEUs. So I will share that here. And again, thank you to Meagan and Katy for your work today. We appreciate you.
Well, and thank you to all of you for being excellent participants.
I will go ahead and stop the recording, but that doesn't mean you can't continue to answer questions.